Hello. Nice to see you guys again. Thanks for coming out. Hopefully this isn't going to be too loud. I live in a row house, so there's another house on the other side of the wall, and they seem like they're doing Sunday evening movies. And so there's it seems like an adventure flick. So hopefully the sound doesn't bleed through too much. So this is the second session of our reading of Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And this book dates to the early 1960s. And so the first couple of chapters, just for a recap, the main characters are a girl, Meg, and her younger brother, Charles Wallace. And it starts out, it's like a very stormy night, and she's up in the attic room and she can't sleep, and she goes down, and they're down in the kitchen, and Charles Wallace, who's the younger brother, has gotten up already and made some hot milk for Coco, and the mother comes in, and then in the middle of all of this blustery hurricane storm, this odd woman comes in out of the storm, and she is let's see, is it Miss Whatsit, I think, and she's all bundled up, and she just makes herself a home, and it's very odd. And at the end, she mentions something about to the mother, about there being a tesseract. And part of this whole framework is that the dad has been missing. He's on some sort of top secret assignment, and he's gone missing. And that's sort of a source of a lot of anxiety for everyone in the household, that the father's gone. And Charles Wallace is sort of a very bright but strange young child. And Meg's persona is that she's misunderstood and she feels very ugly compared to her beautiful mother. And then there are these two twins who are middle school age, Sandy and Dennis, who are more normal, the normal ones in the family. And so then the second chapter that we read, they were going to go, Meg and Charles Wallace, to go out and find Mrs. Whatsit, she and two friends were living in this abandoned haunted house that was sort of backed up to their property. And this is set, oh gosh, I don't know. It's somewhere in New England, sort of like in the wooded area, in this rural wooded town. And they go to confront the Ms. Whatsit because they've stolen the sheets from the neighbors, and they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble. And then when they're there on the way in the woods, and they have their dog with them, they meet this boy, Calvin. And Calvin is Meg's age, and he's a basketball player, and he comes from sort of an unhappy home. And so they meet up with him, and they didn't know him, but the Ms. Whatsit sort of vouches that he's okay. And so they decide to bring him home for dinner. And so that's where chapter 3 starts, which is Mrs. Witch. Which is in who, what, which, where, not which is without the T. Okay. All right. Okay. So in the forest, evening was already beginning to fall, and they walked in silence. Charles and Fortinbras is the dog, gamboled ahead, and Calvin walked with Meg, his fingers barely touching her arm in a protective gesture. Most confusing afternoon of my life, she thought. And yet, I don't feel confused or upset anymore. I only feel happy. Why is that? Well, maybe we weren't meant to meet before this, Calvin said. I mean, I knew who you were in school and everything, but I didn't know you. But I'm glad we've met now, Meg. We're going to be friends, you know. I'm glad too, Meg whispered, and they were silent again. And when they got back to the house, Ms. Murry, the mom, was still in the lab, and she was watching a pale blue fluid move slowly through a tube from beaker to a retort. So she's a scientist. They have a lab in their house. Over a Bunsen burner bubbled a big earthenware dish of stew. Don't tell Sandy and Dennis I'm cooking out here, she said. They're always suspicious that a few chemicals may get in with the meat. But I had an experiment I wanted to stay with. This is Calvin O'Keefe, Mother, Meg said. Is there enough for him too? It smells super. Hello, Calvin. Ms. Murry shook hands with him. Nice to meet you. We aren't having anything but stew tonight, but it's a good thick one. Sounds wonderful to me, Calvin said. May I use your phone so my mother will know where I am? Of course. Show them where it is, will you please, Meg? I won't ask you to use the other one out here if you don't mind. I'd like to finish up this experiment. Meg led the way into the house. Charles Wallace and Fortinbras had gone off. Outdoors, she could hear Sandy and Dennis hammering at the fort they were building up on one of the maples. This way. Meg went through the kitchen and into the living room. I don't know why I call her when I don't come home, Calvin said, his voice bitter. She wouldn't notice. He sighed and dialed. Ma, he said, oh, Hinky, tell Ma I won't be home till late. Now don't forget, I don't want to be locked out again. He hung up and looked at Meg. Do you know how lucky you are? She smiled rather wryly. Not most of the time. A mother like that, a house like this. Gee, your mother's gorgeous. You should see my mother. She had all her upper teeth out, and Pop got her a plate, but she won't wear it. And most days she won't even comb her hair. Not that it makes much difference when she does. He clenched his fists. But I love her. That's the funny part of it. I love them all, and they don't give a hoot about me. Maybe that's why I call when I'm not going to be home. Because I care. Nobody else does. You don't know how lucky you are to be loved. Meg said in a startled way, I guess I never thought of that. I guess I just took it for granted. Calvin looked somber, and then his enormous smile lit up his face again. Things are going to happen, Meg. Good things. I feel it. He began wandering, still slowly, around the pleasant, if shabby, living room. He stopped before a picture on the piano of a small group of men standing together on a bench. Who's this? Oh, it's a bunch of scientists. Where? Meg went over to the picture. Cape Canaveral. This one's father. Which? Here. The one with glasses? Yep, the one who needs a haircut, Meg giggled, forgetting her worries in her pleasure at showing Calvin the picture. His hair's sort of the same color as mine, and he keeps forgetting to have it cut. Mother usually ends up doing it for him. She bought the clippers and stuff because he won't take time to go to the barber. Calvin studied the picture. I like him, he announced judiciously. Looks kind of like Charles Wallace, doesn't he? Meg laughed again. When Charles Wallace was a baby, he looked exactly like father, and it was really funny. Calvin continued to look at the picture. He's not handsome or anything, but I like him. Meg was indignant. He is too handsome. Calvin shook his head. Nah, he's tall and skinny like me. Well, I think you're handsome, Meg said. Father's eyes are kind of like yours, too. Really blue. Only you don't notice his as much because of the glasses. Where is he now? Meg stiffened. But she didn't have to answer because the door from the lab to the kitchen slammed and Ms. Murry came in carrying the dish of stew. Now, she called, I'll finish this up properly on the stove. Have you done your homework, Meg? Not quite, Meg said, going back into the kitchen. Well, then I'm sure Calvin won't mind if you finish before dinner. Sure, go ahead. Calvin fished in his pocket and pulled out a wad of folded paper. As a matter of fact, I have some junk of my own to finish up. Math. That's the one thing I have a hard time keeping up with. I'm okay on anything to do with words, but I don't do as well with numbers. Ms. Murry smiled. Why don't you get Meg to help you? But see, I'm several grades above Meg. Well, try asking her to help you with your math anyhow, Ms. Murry suggested. Well, sure, said Calvin, but it's pretty complicated. Meg smoothed out the paper and studied it. Do they care how you do it? She asked. I mean, can you work it out in your own way? Well, sure, as long as I understand and I get the answers right. Well, we have to do it their way. Now, look, Calvin, don't you see how much easier it would be if I helped if you did it this way? And her pencil flew over the paper. Hey, Calvin said. Hey, I think I get it. Show me once more on another one. And again, Meg's pencil was busy. All you have to remember is that every ordinary fraction can be converted into an infinite periodic decimal fraction. See? So 3/7 is 0.428571. This is the craziest family. Calvin grinned at her. I suppose I should stop being surprised by now, but you're supposed to be dumb in school, always being called up on the carpet. Oh, I am. Well, the trouble with Meg and math, said Ms. Murry briskly, is that Meg and her father used to play with numbers, and Meg learned far too many shortcuts. And so when they want her to do the problems the long way around at school, she gets sullen and stubborn and sets up a fine mental block for herself. Are there any more morons like Meg and Charles around? Calvin asked. If so, I should meet more of them. Well, it might also help if Meg's handwriting were legible, Ms. Murry said. With a good deal of difficulty, I can usually decipher it, but I doubt very much if her teachers can or are willing to take the time. I'm planning on giving her a typewriter for Christmas, and that may be a help. If I ever get anything right, no one will believe it's me, said Meg. What's a meg parsec? Calvin asked. Oh, that's one of Father's nicknames for me, Meg said. It's also 3.26 million light years. What's E equals mc squared? That's Einstein's equation. Well, what's E stand for? Energy. M, mass. C squared, that is the square of the velocity of light in centimeters per second. By what countries is Peru bounded? I haven't the faintest idea. I think it's in South America somewhere. What is the capital of New York? Well, New York City, of course. Who wrote Boswell's Life of Johnson? Oh, Calvin, I'm not good at English. Calvin groaned and turned to Miss Murry. I see what you mean. Her, I wouldn't want to teach. She's a little one-sided, I'll grant you, Miss Murry said, though I blame her father and myself for that. She still enjoys playing with her doll's house, though. Mother, Meg shrieked in agony. Oh, darling, I'm sorry, said Miss Murry swiftly, but I'm sure Calvin understands what I mean. With a sudden enthusiastic gesture, Calvin flung his arms out wide as though he were embracing Meg and her mother. The whole house. How did this happen? Isn't it wonderful? I feel as though I were just being born. I'm not alone anymore. Do you realize what this means to me? Well, but you're good at basketball and things, Meg protested. You're good in school and everybody likes you. Well, for all the most unimportant reasons, Calvin said, there hasn't been anybody in the world that I could talk to. Sure, I mean, I can function on the same level as everybody else and I can hold myself down, but it isn't me. Meg took a batch of forks from the drawer and turned them over and looking at them. I'm all confused again. Oh, so am I, said Calvin gaily, but at least now I know we're going somewhere. Meg was pleased and a little surprised when the twins were excited at having Calvin for supper. They knew more about his athletic record and they were far more impressed by it than she. Calvin ate 5 bowls of stew, 3 saucers of Jell-O, and a dozen cookies, and then Charles Wallace insisted that Calvin take him up to bed and read to him. The twins, who had finished their homework, were allowed to watch half an hour of TV. Meg helped her mother with the dishes and then sat at the table and struggled with her homework, but she could not concentrate. Mother, are you upset? She asked suddenly. Miss Murry looked up from a copy of an English scientific magazine through which she was leaping, and for a moment she did not speak. And then, yes. Why? Again, Miss Murry paused. She held her hands out and looked at them. They were long and strong and beautiful, and she touched with the fingers of her right hand the broad gold band on the 3rd finger of her left hand. I am still quite a young woman, you know, she said finally, and though I realize that it's very difficult for you children to conceive, I am still very much in love with your father, and I miss him quite dreadfully. And you think all of this has something to do with father? I think it must have. But what? That I do not know, but it seems the only explanation. Do you think things always have an explanation? Yes, I believe that they do. But I think that with our human limitations, we're not always able to understand the explanations. But you see, Meg, just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that the explanation doesn't exist. I like to understand things, Meg said. We all do, but it isn't always possible. Charles Wallace understands more than the rest of us, doesn't he? Yes. Why? Well, I suppose because he's different, Meg. Well, different how? I'm not quite sure. You know yourself, he's not like anybody else. No, and I wouldn't want him to be, Meg said defensively. Wanting doesn't have anything to do with it. Charles Wallace is what he is. Different. New. New? Yes, that's what your father and I feel. Meg twisted her pencil so hard that it broke, and she laughed. I'm sorry. I'm not really being destructive. I'm just trying to get things straight. I know. But Charles Wallace doesn't look different from anybody else. No, Meg, but people are more than just the way they look. Charles Wallace's difference isn't physical. It's in essence. Meg sighed heavily and took off her glasses and twirled them and put them back on. Well, I know Charles Wallace is different, and I know he's something more, and I guess I'll just have to accept it without understanding it. Ms. Murry smiled at her. Maybe that's really the point I was trying to put across. Yeah, Meg said dubiously. Her mother smiled again. Maybe that's why our visitor last night didn't surprise me. Maybe that's why I'm able to have a willing suspension of disbelief because of Charles Wallace. Are you like Charles? Meg asked. I? Well, heavens no. I'm blessed with more brains and opportunities than many people, but there's nothing about me that breaks out of the ordinary mold. Well, your looks do, Meg said. Miss Murry laughed. You just haven't had enough basis for comparison, Meg. I'm really very ordinary. Calvin O'Keefe coming in then said, "Ha ha. Charles all settled?" Miss Murry asked. Yes. Well, what did you read to him? Genesis, his choice. By the way, what kind of an experiment were you working on this afternoon, Ms. Murray? Oh, something my husband and I were cooking up together. I don't want to be too far behind him when he gets back. Mother, Meg pursued, Charles says I'm not one thing or the other, not flesh nor fowl nor good red herring. Oh, for crying out loud, Calvin said. You're Meg, aren't you? Come on, let's go for a walk. But Meg was still not satisfied. And what do you make of Calvin? She demanded of her mother. Miss Murray laughed. I don't want to make anything of Calvin. I like him very much, and I'm delighted that he's found his way here. Mother, you were going to tell me about a tesseract. Yes. A troubled look came into Miss Murray's eyes. But not now, Meg, not now. Go on for that walk with Calvin. I'm going up to kiss Charles, and then I have to see that the twins get to bed. Outdoors, the grass was wet with dew, and the moon was halfway up and dimmed the stars for a great arc. Calvin reached out and took Meg's hand with a gesture as simple and friendly as Charles Wallace's. Were you upsetting your mother? He asked gently. I don't think I was, but she's upset. What about? Father. Calvin led Meg across the lawn. The shadows of the trees were long and twisted, and there was a heavy, sweet, autumnal smell to the air. Meg stumbled as the land sloped suddenly downhill, but Calvin's strong hand steadied her, and they walked carefully across the twins' vegetable garden, picking their way through the rows of cabbages, beets, broccoli, pumpkins. Looming on their left were all the tall stalks of corn. Ahead of them was a small apple orchard bounded by a stone wall, and beyond this, the woods through which they had walked that afternoon. Calvin led the way to the wall and then sat there, his red hair shining silver in the moonlight, his body dappled with patterns from the tangle of branches. He reached up, pulled an apple off a gnarled limb, and handed it to Meg, and then picked one for himself. Tell me about your father. Well, he's a physicist. Well, sure, we all know that, and he's supposed to have left your mother and gone off with some dame. Meg chirked up from the stone on which she was perched, but Calvin grabbed her by the waist and pulled her back down. Hold it, kid. I didn't say anything you hadn't heard already, did I? No, Meg said, but continued to pull away. Let me go. Come on, calm down. You know it isn't true, and I know it isn't true. And how could anybody, after one look at your mother, could believe any man would leave her for another woman? Just shows how far jealousy will make people go. Right? I guess so, Meg said, but her happiness had fled, and she was back in a morass of anger and resentment. Look, dope, Calvin shook her gently. I just want to get things straight, sort out the fact from the fiction. Your father's a physicist. That's a fact, yes. He's a PhD several times over. Yes. Most of the time he works alone, but for some of the time he works at the Institute for Higher Learning in Princeton, correct? Yes. And then he did some work for the government, didn't he? Yes. So you take it from there. That's all I know. That's about all I know too, Meg said. Maybe Mother knows more. I don't know. What he did was, well, it was what they call classified. Top secret, you mean? Well, that's right. And you don't even have any idea what it was about? Meg shook her head. No, not really. Just an idea because of where he was. Well, where? Well, he was out in New Mexico for a while, and we were with him there. And then he was in Florida, Cape Canaveral, and we were with him there too. And then he was going to be traveling a lot, so we came here. You've always had this house? Yes, but we used to just live in it in the summer. And you don't know where your father was sent? No. I mean, at first we got lots of letters. Mother and father always wrote each other every day, and I think Mother still writes him every night. Every once in a while, the postmistress makes some kind of crack about all her letters. I suppose they think she's pursuing him or something, Calvin said rather bitterly. They can't understand plain, ordinary love when they see it. Well, go on. What happened next? Well, nothing happened, Meg said. That's the trouble. Well, what about your father's letters? They just stopped coming. You haven't heard anything at all? No, Meg said, nothing. Her voice was heavy with misery, and silence fell between them, as tangible as the dark tree shadows that fell upon their laps and that now seemed to rest upon them as heavily as though they possessed a measurable weight of their own. At last, Calvin spoke in a dry, unemotional voice, not looking at Meg. Do you think he could be dead? Again, Meg leaped up, and again Calvin pulled her down. No, they would have told us if he were dead. There's always a telegram or something. They always tell you. What do they tell you? Meg choked down a sob and managed to speak over it. Oh, Calvin. Mother's tried to find out. She's been down to Washington and everything, and all they'll say is that he's on some secret and dangerous mission. And she can be very proud of him, but he won't be able to communicate with us for a while. And then they give us news as soon as they have it. Meg, now don't get mad, but do you think maybe they don't know? A slow tear trickled down Meg's cheek. Well, that's what I'm afraid of. Why don't you cry? Calvin asked gently. You're just crazy about your father, aren't you? Go ahead and cry. It'll do you good. Meg's voice came out, trembling over tears. I cry too much. I should be like Mother. I should be able to control myself. Your mother's a completely different person, and she's a lot older than you. I wish I were a different person, Meg said shakily. I hate myself. Calvin reached over and took off her glasses, and then he pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket and wiped her eyes. This gesture of tenderness undid her completely, and she put her head down on her knees and sobbed. Calvin sat quietly beside her, and every once in a while patting her head. I'm sorry, she sobbed finally. I'm terribly sorry. Now you'll hate me. Oh, Meg, you are a moron, Calvin said. Don't you know you're the nicest thing that's happened to me in a long, long time? Meg raised her head, and the moonlight shone on her tear-stained face. Without the glasses, her eyes were unexpectedly beautiful. If Charles Wallace is a sport, I think I am a biological mistake. Moonlight flashed across her braces as she spoke, and now she was waiting to be contradicted, but Calvin said, Do you know that this is the first time I've seen you without your glasses? I'm blind as a bat without them. I'm nearsighted like Father. Well, you know what? You've got dreamboat eyes, Calvin said. Listen, you go right on wearing your glasses. I don't think I want anyone else to see what gorgeous eyes you have. Meg smiled with pleasure. She could feel herself blushing, and she wondered if the blush would be visible in the moonlight. Okay, hold it, you two, came a voice out of the shadows, and Charles Wallace stepped into the moonlight. I wasn't spying on you, he said quickly, and I hate to break things up, but this is it, kids. This is it. His voice quivered with excitement. This is what? Calvin asked. We're going. Going where? Meg reached out and instinctively grabbed for Calvin's hand. I don't know exactly, Charles Wallace said, but I think it's to find Father. And suddenly 2 eyes seemed to spring at them out of the darkness. It was the moonlight striking on Mrs. Who's glasses. She was standing next to Charles Wallace, and how she had managed to appear where a moment there had been nothing but flickering shadows in the moonlight, Meg had no idea. She heard a sound behind her and turned around, and there was Miss Whatsit scrambling over the wall. My, but I wish there were no wind, Miss Whatsit said plaintively. It's so difficult with all these clothes. She wore her outfit of the night before, rubber boots and all, with the addition of one of Mrs. Buncombe's sheets, which she had draped over her. And as she slid off the wall, the sheet caught on a low branch and came off. The felt hat slipped over both eyes, and another branch plucked at the pink stole. Oh, dear, she cried. I shall never learn to manage. Mrs. Who wafted over to her, tiny feet scarcely seeming to touch the ground, the lenses of her glasses glittering. Dante, what grievous pain a little fault doth give thee. And with a claw-like hand, she pushed the hat up on Mrs. Whatsit's forehead, untangled the stole from the tree, and with a deft gesture, took the sheet and folded it. Oh, thank you, Miss Whatsit said. You're so clever. Un anzo viejo sabe más que un potro, a Perez. An old ass knows more than a young colt. Well, just because you're a few paltry billion years, Ms. Whatsit was starting indignantly when a sharp, strange voice cut in. All right, girls, this is no time for bickering. It's Mrs. Witch, Charles Wallace said, and there was a faint gust of wind. The leaves shivered in it, and the patterns of moonlight shifted, and in a circle of silver, something shimmered, quivered, and the voice said, I do not think I will materialize completely. I find it tiring, and we have much to do. Okay, so that's chapter 3. So we start chapter 4, the black thing. The trees were lashed into a violent frenzy. Meg screamed and clutched at Calvin, and Mrs. Witch's authoritative voice called out, Quiet, child. Did a shadow fall across the moon, or did the moon simply go out, extinguished as abruptly and completely as a candle? There was the sound of leaves, a terrifying rushing, and all the light was gone. Darkness was complete, and suddenly the wind was gone and all the sound. Meg felt that Calvin was being torn from her. When she reached for him, her fingers touched nothing. She screamed out, "Charles!" And whether it was to help him or for him to help her, she did not know. The word was flung back down her throat and she choked on it. She was completely alone. She had lost the protection of Calvin's hand, and Calvin was nowhere, either to save or to turn to. She was alone in a fragment of nothingness. No light, no sound, no feeling. Where was her body? She tried to move in her panic, but there was nothing to move. Just as light and sound had vanished, she was gone too. The corporeal Meg simply was not. And then she felt her limbs again, and her legs and arms were tingling faintly as though they had been asleep, and she blinked her eyes rapidly. But though she was herself somehow back, nothing else was. It was not as simple as darkness or an absence of light. Darkness has a tangible quality. It can be moved through and felt. In the darkness, you can bark your shins. The world of things still exists around you, but she was lost in a horrifying void. It was the same way with the silence. This was more than silence. A deaf person can feel vibrations, and here there was nothing to feel. Suddenly, she was aware of her heart beating rapidly within the cage of her ribs. Had it stopped before? What had made it start again? The tingling in her arms and legs grew stronger, and suddenly she felt movement. And this movement she felt must be the turning of the earth, rotating on its axis, traveling its elliptic course around the sun. And this feeling of moving with the earth was somewhat like the feeling of being in the ocean, out in the ocean beyond this rising and falling of the breakers, lying on the moving water, pulsing gently with the swells and feeling the gentle, inexorable tug of the moon. I am asleep, she thought. I am dreaming, she thought. I am having a nightmare. I want to wake up. Let me wake up. Well, Charles Wallace's voice said, that was quite a trip. I do think you might have warned us. Light began to pulse and quiver, and Meg blinked and shoved shakily at her glasses, and there was Charles Wallace standing indignantly in front of her, his hands on his hips. Meg, she shouted, Calvin, where are you? She saw Charles and she heard him, but she could not go to him. She could not shove through the strange, trembling light to meet him. Calvin's voice came as though it was pushing through a cloud. Well, just give me time, will you? I'm older than you are. And Meg gasped. It wasn't that Calvin wasn't in there and then that he was. It was that it wasn't that part of him came first and then the rest of him followed, like a hand and then an arm and an eye and then a nose. It was sort of a shimmering, a looking at Calvin through water, through smoke, through fire. And then here he was, solid and reassuring. Meg, Charles Wallace's voice came. Meg, Calvin, where's Meg? I'm right here, she tried to say, but her voice seemed to be caught at its source. Meg, Calvin cried, and he turned around looking wildly. Miss Witch, you haven't left Meg behind, have you? Charles Wallace shouted. If you've hurt Meg, any of you, Calvin started, but suddenly Meg felt a violent push and shattering as though she had been thrust out of a wall of glass. Oh, there you are, Charles Wallace said, and he rushed over to her and hugged her. But where am I? Meg asked breathlessly, relieved to hear that her voice was now coming out of her in a more or less normal way. She looked about rather wildly. There you were standing in the sunlit field, and the air about them was moving with the delicious fragrance that comes only on the rarest of spring days, when the sun's touch is gentle and the apple blossoms are just beginning to unfold. She pushed her glasses up on her nose to reassure herself that what she was seeing was real. They had left the silver glint of a biting autumn evening, and now around them everything was golden with light. The grasses of the field were tender, new green, and scattered about were tiny multicolored flowers. Meg turned slowly to face a mountain, reaching so high into the sky that its peak was lost in a crown of puffy white clouds. From the trees at the base of the mountain came a sudden singing of birds. There was an air of such ineffable peace and joy all around that her heart was wildly thumping, and that her heart's wild thumping slowed. When shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? came Mrs. Who's voice, and suddenly the three of them were there. Ms. Whatsit in her pink stole askew, Ms. Who with her spectacles gleaming, and Ms. Witch still a little more than a shimmer. Delicate, multicolored butterflies were fluttering about them as though in greeting. Ms. Whatsit and Ms. Who began to giggle, and they giggled until it seemed that whatever their private joke was, they would fall down with the wild fun of it. And the shimmer seemed to be laughing too, and it became vaguely darker and more solid, and then it appeared a figure in a black robe and a black peaked hat, beady eyes and a beaked nose and long gray hair, and one bony claw clutched a broomstick. "Well, just to keep you girls happy," the strange voice said, and Ms. Whatsit and Miss Who fell into each other's arms in gales of laughter. "If you ladies have your fun, I think you should tell Calvin and Meg a little more about all of this," Charles Wallace said coldly. "You scared Meg half out of her wits, whisking her off that way without any warning." Fix finexerunt animi raro et per poca loquentis, Ms. Who intoned. Horace, to action little, less to words inclined. "Mrs. Who, I wish you'd stop quoting." Charles Wallace sounded very annoyed. Ms. Whatsit adjusted her stole. "But she finds it so difficult to verbalize, Charles dear. It helps her if she can quote instead of speaking out words of her own." "And we mustn't lose our sense of humor," Ms. Witch said. "The only way to cope with something so deadly serious is to try to treat it a little lightly." "But that's going to be hard for Meg," Ms. Whatsit said. "It's going to be hard for her to realize that we are serious." "Well, what about me?" Calvin asked. "Well, the life of your father isn't at stake," Ms. Whatsit told him. What about Charles Wallace then?" Well, Ms. Whatsit, unoiled door hinge voice was warm with affection and pride. Charles Wallace knows that it's for far more than just the life of his father. Charles Wallace knows what's at stake. But remember," Ms. Who said, and then something in Greek by Euripides, "nothing is hopeless. We must hope for everything." Okay, I'm going to read that one again. "Nothing is hopeless. We must hope for everything." "Well, where are we now, and how did we get here?" Calvin asked. "Uriel, the third planet of the star Malak in the spiral nebula of Messier 101. "This I am supposed to believe?" Calvin asked indignantly. "As you like," said Mrs. Witch coldly. And for some reason, Meg felt that Ms. Witch, despite her looks and ephemeral broomstick, was someone in whom she could put complete trust. "It doesn't seem any more peculiar than anything else that's happened." "Well, then, someone just tell me how we got here." Calvin's voice was still angry, and his freckles seemed to stand out on his face. "Even traveling at the speed of light, it would take us years and years to get here." "Oh, we don't travel at the speed of anything," Miss Whatsit explained earnestly. "We tesser, or you might say we wrinkle." Tesser, Meg thought. Well, could that have anything to do with Mother's tesseract? She was beginning to ask when Mrs. Witch started to speak, and one does not interrupt when Ms. Witch is speaking. Ms. Whatsit is young and naive. She keeps thinking she can explain things in words, Ms. Who said. Qui plus est, plus c'était. I'm not doing French. French, you know, the more a man knows, the less he talks. But she has to use words for Meg and Calvin, Charles reminded Mrs. Who, and if you brought them along, they have a right to know what's going on. Meg went up to Ms. Witch. In the intensity of her question, she had forgotten about the tesseract. Is my father here? Mrs. Witch shook her head. Not here, Meg. Let Ms. Whatsit explain. She is young, and the language of words is easier for her than it is for Ms. Who and me. Well, we stopped here, Ms. Whatsit explained, more or less to catch our breaths and to give you a chance to know what you're up against. But what about Father? Meg asked. Is he all right? Well, for the moment, love, yes. He's one of the reasons we're here, but you'll see he's only one. Well, where is he? Please take me to him. Well, we can't. Not yet, Charles said. You have to be patient, Meg. But I'm not patient, Meg cried passionately. I've never been patient. Mrs. Hu's glasses shone at her gently. If you want to help your father, then you must learn patience. Vitam impendere vero, to stake one's life for the truth. To stake one's life for the truth. That is what we must do. Well, that is what your father is doing, Miss Whatsit nodded, her voice like Miss Hu's, very serious, very solemn. And then she smiled her radiant smile. Now, why don't you three children wander around and Charles can explain things a little? You're perfectly safe on Uriel, and that's why we stopped here to rest. But aren't you coming with us? Meg asked fearfully. There was a silence for a moment, and then Mrs. Witch raised her authoritative hand. Show them, she said to Miss Whatsit, and something in her voice Meg felt prickles of apprehension. Now? Miss Whatsit asked, her creaky voice rising to a squeak. Whatever it was that Miss Witch wanted them to see, it was something that made Miss Whatsit uncomfortable too. Now, Miss Witch said, they may as well know. Should I change? Miss Whatsit asked. Better. I hope it won't upset the children too much, Miss Whatsit murmured, as though to herself. Should I change too? Miss Who asked. Oh, but I've had fun in these clothes. But I have to admit, Miss Whatsit is the best at it. Das Werk lobt den Meister, German. The work proves the craftsman. Shall I transform now too? Mrs. Witch shook her head. Not yet. Not here. You may wait. Now, don't be frightened, loves, Miss Whatsit said. Her plump little body began to shimmer, to quiver, to shift, and the wild colors of her clothes became muted and whitened, and the pudding bag shape stretched and lengthened and merged, and suddenly before the children was a creature more beautiful than any Meg had ever imagined, and the beauty lay in far more than the outward description. Outwardly, Mrs. Whatsit was surely no longer a Mrs. Whatsit. She was a marble white body with powerful flanks, something like a horse, but at the same time completely unlike a horse. For from the magnificently modeled back sprang nobly formed torso, arms, and head resembling a man's, but a man with such perfection of dignity and virtue, an exaltation of joy such as Meg had never before seen. No, she thought, it's not like a Greek centaur, not in the least. And from the shoulders, slowly a pair of wings unfolded, wings made of rainbows, of light upon water, of poetry. Calvin fell to his knees. No, Miss Whatsit said, though her voice was not Miss Whatsit's voice. Not to me, Calvin, never to me. Stand up. Carry them, Miss Witch commanded. And with a gesture both delicate and strong, Miss Whatsit knelt in front of the children, stretching her wings wide and holding them steady but quivering. Onto my back now, the new voice said. The children took hesitant steps towards the beautiful creature. But what do we call you now? Calvin asked. Oh, my dears, came the new voice, a rich voice with the warmth of woodwind and the clarity of a trumpet, the mystery of an English horn. You can't go on changing my name each time I metamorphose, and I've had such a pleasure being Miss Whatsit. I think you'd better keep to that. She, he, it smiled at them, and the radiance of the smile was as tangible as a soft breeze, as directly warming as the rays of the sun. Come, Charles Wallace clambered up. Meg and Calvin followed him, and Meg sitting between the two boys, and a tremor went through the great wings, and then Miss Whatsit lifted, and they were moving through the air. Meg soon found that there was no need to cling to Charles Wallace or Calvin. The great creature's flight was serenely smooth, and the boys were eagerly looking around the landscape. Look, Charles Wallace pointed out, the mountains are so tall you can't even see where they end. And Meg looked up, and indeed the mountains seemed to be reaching into infinity. They left the fertile fields and flew across a great plateau of granite-like rock shaped into enormous monoliths. And these were a definitely rhythmic form, but they were not statues. They were like nothing Meg had ever seen. And she wondered if they had been made by wind and weather, by the formation of this earth, or if they were a creation of beings like the ones which she rode. They left the great granite plain and flew over a garden even more beautiful than anything in a dream, and in it were gathered many creatures like the one Miss Whatsit had become, some lying among the flowers, some swimming in a broad crystal river that flowed through the garden, some flying in what Meg was sure must be a kind of a dance, moving in and out and above the trees, and they were making music, music that came not only from their throats but from the movement of their great wings as well. What are they singing? Meg asked excitedly. Ms. Whatsit shook her beautiful head. It won't get into your words. I just can't possibly transfer it to your words. Are you getting any of it, Charles? Charles Wallace sat very still on the broad back, and on his face an intently listening look, the look he had when he delved into Meg or his mother. A little, just a very little, but I think I could get more in time. Yes, you could learn it, Charles, but there isn't time. We can only stay here long enough to rest up and make a few preparations. Meg hardly listened to her. I want to know what they're saying. I want to know what it means. Try, Charles, Miss Whatsit Earn. Try to translate. You can let yourself go now. You don't have to hold back. But I can't, Charles Wallace cried in an anguished voice. I don't know enough yet. Not yet. And then try to work with me and see if I can't verbalize it a little for them. Charles Wallace got his look of probing, of listening. I know that look, Meg thought suddenly, and now I think I know what it means because I've had it myself sometimes doing math with Father when a problem is just about to come clear. Miss Whatsit seemed to be listening to Charles's thoughts. Well, yes, that's an idea. I can try too. Too bad you don't really know it, so you can't give it to me direct, Charles. It's so much more work this way. Don't be lazy, Charles said. Ms. Whatsit did not take offense. She explained, oh, it's not, it's my favorite kind of work, Charles. That's why they chose me to go along, even though I'm so much younger. It's one of my real talents, but it takes a tremendous amount of energy, and we're going to need every ounce of energy for what's ahead of us. But I'll try. For Calvin and Meg, I'll try. And she was silent, and the great wings almost stopped moving. Only a delicate stirring seemed to keep them aloft. Listen, then, Ms. Whatsit said. The resonant voice rose, and the words seemed to be all around them, so that Meg felt she could almost reach out and touch them. Sing unto the Lord a new song, and his praise from the end of the earth, ye that go down to the sea, and all that is therein, the isles and the inhabitants thereof. Let the wilderness and the cities thereof lift their voices. Let the inhabitants of the rocks sing, and let them shout from the top of the mountains. Let them give glory unto the Lord. And throughout her entire body, Meg felt a pulse of joy, such as she had never known. And Calvin's hand reached out, and he did not clasp her hand in his. He moved his fingers so that they were barely touching hers, but joy flowed through them, back and forth between them, around them and inside them. And when Mrs. Whatsit sighed, it seemed completely incomprehensible that through this bliss could come the faintest whisper of doubt. We must go now, children. Miss Whatsit's voice was deep with sadness, and Meg could not understand. Raising her head, Miss Whatsit gave a call that seemed to be a command, and one of the creatures flying above the trees nearest them raised its head to listen, and then flew off and picked 3 flowers from a tree growing near the river and brought them over. Each of you take one, Miss Whatsit said, and I'll tell you how to use them later. As Meg took her flower, she realized it was not a single blossom, but hundreds of tiny flowerets forming a kind of hollow bell. Where are we going? Calvin asked. Up. The wings moved steadily, swiftly. The garden was left behind, the stretch of granite, the mighty shapes, and then Miss Whatsit was flying upward, climbing steadily, up, up, up. Below them, the trees of the mountain dwindled and became sparse and were replaced by bushes, and then small dry grasses, and then vegetation ceased entirely, and there were only rocks and points and peaks of rock, sharp and dangerous. Hold tight, Ms. Whatsit said. Don't slip. Meg felt Calvin's arms circle her waist in a secure hold, and still they moved up, and now they were in clouds, and they could see nothing but drifting whiteness, and the moisture clung to them, and the condensed ice and icy droplets. And as Meg shivered, Calvin's grip tightened. In front of her, Charles Wallace sat quietly, and once he turned just long enough to give her a swift glance of tenderness and concern. But Meg felt at each moment passed, that he was growing farther and farther away, that he was becoming less and less her adored baby brother, and more one with whatever kind of being Ms. Whatsit, Ms. Who, and Ms. Witch actually were. Abruptly, they burst out of the clouds and into a shaft of light. Below them were still rocks, and above them the rocks continued to reach up into the sky. But now, though it seemed miles upward, Meg could see where the mountains at last came to an end. Ms. Wetzel continued to climb, her wings straining a little, and Meg felt her heart racing. Cold sweat began to gather on her face, and her lips felt as though they were turning blue, and she began to gasp. All right, children, use your flowers now, Ms. Wetzel said. The atmosphere will continue to get thinner from now on. Hold the flowers up to your face and breathe through them, and they will give you enough oxygen. It won't be as much as you're used to, but it will be enough. Meg had almost forgotten the flowers and was grateful to realize she was still clasping them and she hadn't let them fall from her fingers. She pressed her face into the blossoms and breathed deeply. Calvin held her with one arm, but he too held the flower to his face, and Charles Wallace moved the hand with the flowers slowly, almost as though he were in a dream. Miss Wetsit's wings strained against the thinness of the atmosphere. The summit was only a little way above them, and then they were there. Miss Wetsit came to rest on a small plateau of silvery smooth rock, and there ahead of them was a great white disk. One of Uriel's moons, was Miss Wetsit told them, her mighty voice faintly breathless. Oh, it's beautiful, Meg cried. It's beautiful. The silver light from the enormous moon poured over them, blending with the golden quality of the day, flowing over the children, over Miss Wetsit, and over the mountain peak. Now we will turn around, Miss Wetsit said, and the quality of her voice, Meg was afraid again. But when they turned, she saw nothing. Ahead of them was the thin, clear blue of sky. Below them, the rocks thrusting out of the shifting sea of white clouds. Now we will wait, Miss Wetsit said, for sunset and moonset. And almost as she spoke, the light began to deepen and darken. I want to watch the moon set, Charles Wallace said. No, child, do not turn around, any of you. Face out towards the dark. What I have to show you will be more visible then. Look ahead, straight ahead, as far as you can possibly look. And Meg's eyes ached from the strain of looking and seeing nothing. And then above the clouds, which encircled the mountain, she seemed to see a shadow, a faint thing of darkness so far off that she was scarcely sure she was really seeing it. Charles Wallace said, "What's that?" "That sort of a shadow out there," Calvin gestured. "What is it? I don't like it." "Watch," Ms. Wetsit commanded. It was a shadow. Nothing but a shadow. It was not even as tangible as a cloud. Was it cast by something, or was it a thing in and of itself? The sky darkened. The gold left the light, and they were surrounded by blue, blue deepening until where they had been, nothing but the evening sky. There was now a faint pulse of star, and then another, and another, and another. And there were more stars than Meg had ever seen before. The atmosphere is so thin here, Ms. Wetsit said, as though in answer to her unasked question, that it does not obscure your vision as it would at home. And now look straight ahead. Meg looked. The dark shadow was still there. It had not lessened or dispersed with the coming of night. And where the shadow was, the stars were not visible. What could there be about or ever would be anything that would chill her with a fear that was beyond shuddering, beyond crying or screaming, or beyond the possibility of comfort? Meg's hand holding the blossoms slowly dropped, and it seemed as though a knife gashed through her lungs, and she gasped, but there was no air for her to breathe, and darkness glazed her eyes and mind, and she started to fall into unconsciousness, and her head dropped into the flowers, which she was still clutching, and she inhaled the fragrance of their purity, and her mind and body revived, and she sat up again, and the shadow was still there, dark and awful. Calvin had her hand strongly in his, but she felt neither strength nor reassurance in his touch. Beside her, a tremor went through Charles Wallace, but he sat very still. He shouldn't be seeing this, Meg thought. This is too much for a little boy, no matter how different and extraordinary a little boy. Calvin turned, rejecting the dark thing that blotted out the light of the stars. Make it go away, Miss Wetsit, he whispered. Make it go away. It's evil. Slowly, the great creature turned around so that the shadow was behind them, so that they only saw the stars unobscured, the soft throb of starlight on the mountain, the descending circle of the great moon swiftly slipping over the horizon. And then without a word from Miss Wetsit, they were traveling down, downward, down, down. And when they reached the corona of clouds, Miss Wetsit said, "You can breathe without the flowers now, my children." Silence again, not a word. It was as though the shadow had somehow reached out with its dark power and touched them so that they were incapable of speech. And when they got back to the flowery field, bathed now in starlight and moonlight from another smaller, lesser rising moon, a little of the tenseness went out of their bodies, and they realized that the body of the beautiful creature on which they rode had been as rigid as theirs. And with a graceful gesture, it dropped to the ground and folded its great wings. Charles Wallace was the first to slide off. "Mrs. Who, Mrs. Which," she called, and there was an immediate quivering in the air, and Miss Who's familiar glasses gleamed at them, and Miss Witch appeared too. But as she had told the children, it was difficult for her to materialize completely, as though there was the robe to materialize completely. And though there was the robe and the peaked hat, Meg could look through them to the mountain and the stars, and she slid off Miss Wetsit's back and walked rather unsteadily after the long ride over to Mrs. Witch. "That dark thing we saw," she said, "is that what Father is fighting?" And that's the end of chapter 4. I think we'll call it a night tonight. So thanks for joining in, everybody.